Hello and good morning. My name is Jeff Stauffer, Community Relations Director with Elville and Associates, and welcome to our webinar today featuring Eric Jorgensen, a special needs planner and founder of Special Needs Navigator. Today we'll be discussing Putting It All Together, a diagnosis to adulthood guide of navigating the disability world. So how this will work today, if you're new to us here on our webinar series, I see we have a lot of new attendees. Welcome, we're glad you're here. You are on mute for the presentation. However, you do have a voice if you have questions, and we really want to encourage questions throughout the presentation. Don't be shy. Please do type them in the questions panel that you have on your screen. Eric will pause during the presentation to respond to them, as well as at the end of the presentation as well. So you received the presentation by email yesterday for your convenience by me to take notes on it if you wish. Also, for professionals on today's webinar, you may receive 1.5 continuing education hours for attending. For attendance records requirements, please email me your board ID, and for CFPs only, I also need the last 4 digits of your social security number as soon as possible so I can submit my required reporting to get your CE approved. Everyone will also receive a post-webinar feedback email right after the presentation. And we do ask that you just take a couple minutes to fill out the simple survey to offer us your feedback about the presentation. You can also offer suggestions for new webinars, and we also have some new webinars coming up I'll talk about a little bit later. And it's also a great time to request a consultation with one of our attorneys here at the firm if you have any planning needs now or in the future. So very briefly, an overview about our firm, which I want to share my screen with you here. So let me do that. You should be able to see this here. So Elville and Associates, we were founded in 2010 in Columbia by principal and lead attorney Stephen Elville. We have a number of different practice areas here at the firm, including estate and special needs planning, elder law and elder care planning, estate and trust administration, asset protection, guardianship and litigation, as well as tax planning. We have 7 attorneys here, 13 staff members in 5 locations. I'm coming to you from our Columbia location, located in the Columbia Gateway community. Our mission, as it always has been and always will be, is to provide practical solutions to our clients' needs through counseling, education, and the use of superior legal technical knowledge. We do offer a lot of education here at the firm. We do that through our planning processes with our clients. We offer over 100 educational webinars and workshops in the communities we serve each year. And we also have an accredited client care program through the Client Care Academy in Boston, one of only 60 law firms in the country, and the sole one in Maryland with that accreditation. We're very proud of that. It's something a lot of our clients take advantage of, and it adds a lot of value to the relationship that our clients have here at Elville and Associates. So we work with clients every day with families with loved ones that have special needs with ideals of client education, collaboration, and compassion in mind. And we're always available for free consultations to discuss your family's needs, and we look forward to being a resource to you. So it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Mr. Eric Jorgensen, Special Needs Navigator. He's presented with us before, and we've wanted to have him back for a long time, so it's a great day here. So Eric has been helping families with loved ones with disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities since his retirement from Navy in 2012. He was widowed the same year he retired, and it was his frustration with the difficulty of navigating services which led him to create the role of Special Needs Advisor. In addition to his MS in Finance and Information Systems and an MBA, Eric has earned the Certified Financial Planner, CFP, Chartered Federal Employee Benefit Consultant, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and Chartered Special Needs Consultant designations. Eric is an active member of the Academy of Special Needs Planners and Montgomery County's Transition Work Group, and serves on the Board of Resource Connections, Inc., a service provider agency in PG County. Eric and his son, William, currently reside in Frederick. So Eric, it is great to have you back. It's been great catching up with you the last couple of days. So welcome, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you. So let me go ahead and switch the presenter mode to you so you can share your screen. And Just going to take me a moment to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Will be all you.
Awesome. So if I have the correct screen up, you should have just the single slide, not the presenter point of view, right? Where you just see it says putting all together, the title of the show, and everything's ready to go.
That's correct. I see the screen.
Cool.
It looks like you're in good shape.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for attending. Jeff, thank you, and Elville Associates for having me. I'm really excited to talk today. I get a lot of energy from questions that the audience brings. I really want my presentation to help you wherever you happen to be on the journey, depending on the age of your child. So today we're going to be talking about birth till adulthood. It's everybody's going to have a different experience, a different situation, and I believe we can learn from each other just as much or more as you're going to be able to learn from me. So please don't hesitate to put the questions in the chat box. As Jeff mentioned, I will be stopping as throughout the presentation to make sure we address those questions. I don't want anybody to try to wait till the end of a presentation and remember what they wanted to ask. So if you come up with a question as I'm talking, go ahead and type it into the chat box, and then Jeff and I will get to it at a breaking point. What I have up right now is a timeline that I use with families to give you an idea of what's coming. And it's not meant to scare anybody or get people stressed out about, oh my gosh, I have to do all these things. It's my hope to do the opposite, where if you're not, let's say your child's in elementary school right now, then focus on that. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about what you should be doing when your child leaves high school. Because the things that you do, the way I have the timeline set up is you're going to set the foundation for what your child needs when they leave high school by doing it in a nice organized fashion, rather than adding stress to yourself and trying to do everything all at once. Sometimes parents are going to be like where I was, where I had no clue where I was on the timeline because there was no timeline that I could find. So when my wife died and I'm trying to figure things out, it was more of go to resource fairs, figure out where I think I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to have done. And as Jeff mentioned in the introduction, it was frustrating. So this timeline is what I'm going to be talking, referring to as we go through this presentation. I have the presentation broken up into different time periods that you may have with your children. If a certain time period has already gone past, then bear with me. Or perhaps if you have something that I don't cover that you think would be valuable to share with other parents, please feel free to add it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the diagnosis. When I think generally speaking, individuals and children are being diagnosed much younger now, in receiving that label much younger now. My son was 3 years old. He got the PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disability, not otherwise specified diagnosis. And back then, the doctor said, we're not comfortable giving an autism diagnosis yet because we don't want to label them before the age of 5. I think that's changed, but it really would have been helpful to get the label sooner to understand what we were up against, for lack of a better term. And so all of this happened for me back in the early 2000s. There wasn't a lot of information out there. Now there is. Now you have Google, you have a lot of national level organizations, state level organizations, and even county level organizations where you can turn to when you have a child with a disability and look for help. So the first thing I like families to do is reach out to those organizations. If you have a child who has been diagnosed with Down syndrome, then reach out to the National Down Syndrome Society, reach out to your local chapter of the ARC, reach out to your local chapter of Down Syndrome Network, and then just get familiar with what they do. Do they have parent support groups? Are they offering any kind of events? What kinds of things are available to you to get ready to bring home the child, or now that you have a diagnosis, to start putting things in place It's not just for education. It can also be things. Does your child like to put things in their mouth? Is there what have other parents used to help parents that like to chew? Things like that. So really getting that parent-to-parent connection is where I really encourage people to get started, because you're not alone. As much as I know I felt like I was alone, and my wife and I think we talked a lot about that in the early years. You're not, and you don't have to be. In this day and age with the internet, there's just a lot of resources out there, and I don't want anybody feeling like they have to go through this alone. So that soapbox being put aside, the next thing I really encourage people to do is apply for services. And we're going to talk specifically about Maryland today. And in Maryland, if you have a child who's been diagnosed with a developmental disability, you can apply to DDA right away. You do not have to wait until you're on Medicaid or your child's on Medicaid. That is going to be a question on the DDA application. Do you have medical assistance? Medical assistance will come into play when DDA starts providing services, because medical assistance or Medicaid is what's going to pay for the DDA service providers. But you can get put on that list. What's going to happen? You apply to DDA within 30 days, 60 days, maybe because of COVID, you're going to have a CCS, a coordinator of community services, come out to visit you and your child. Again, it might be virtually because of the COVID environment, and they're going to ask you. They want to get a gauge of what the environment and what types of supports does your child need. And when they come out to interview you, the best thing you can do is imagine your child on their worst day without you there to support them. Don't make anything up, but you also don't want to sugarcoat anything. As parents, I feel that very often we tend to look to the positives and all the things that our kids can do. I know I'm certainly guilty of this. And when you have a coordinator of care services out there evaluating your child to determine what benefits, if any, are they going to qualify for under DDA, the Department of Developmental Disabilities Administration, you really want to make sure you paint as honest a picture as possible for your child's abilities and disabilities. Very often what's going to happen is you're going to be found to be a future need. You may not receive services right away, and that's okay. What that means is when your child gets older and transitions from high school at 21, 22, that is when DDA will be services will be turned on. So as soon as you apply to DDA and you get that future services designation or finding, you can put DDA out of your mind. What should be happening from that point forward is your community, your CCS should be checking in with you once a year until it gets closer to when your child is ready to transition from high school. Unless something happens, like a death of a parent or something significant, in which case you would want to reach out to your CCS to let them know we have a situation, we need to be reevaluated, and then they can come in and look to see if there's a crisis that needs to be resolved. But if there's no crisis, if there's no major events, after you apply for DDA, get your findings, you're on autopilot for the next, could be 15 years, depending on when you get when you're diagnosed and when you apply. So that's DDA. The autism waiver is Maryland specific, and it's autism specific. So you have to have an autism diagnosis. And that's a very simple application. You can call, you call them to get put on the waiting list. Last time I checked, I think the waiting list was 12 or 13 years. So it's not ideal, but there is a good chance that your child could receive some services under the autism waiver, depending on when you sign up. This is another one of those, you sign up, you get registered, and you put it out of your mind until they call you. It's not something that you really have any control over, so I really encourage you not to stress about it. As long as you've gotten your name on the waiver, you've done everything you can. Again, if you want to check in every year or so to see how things are progressing, you're certainly welcome to do that, but I don't want to add more stress to you. I'd much rather manage your expectations by telling you the autism waiver has a very long waiting list. As long as you get on the waiting list, you've done everything you can. So really try not to think about it afterwards. SSI, or supplemental security income, that is really difficult to get for children because Social Security Administration looks at how much income and assets the parents have. So there is a formula. It is certainly possible for some families to get it. Traditionally, historically, the families that I see that are getting SSI for their children really have negligible income, probably $15,000, $20,000 a year household income, maybe less, with their household. So even, let's say you live in Howard County or Montgomery County and you're making $80,000 to $100,000 a year, and it doesn't feel like that's getting you by because Montgomery County and Howard County are so expensive, probably not going to qualify for SSI. So, it's, and the lower incomes too, even if you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, it's pretty likely you're not going to qualify for any SSI because they look at the child's income. So you're welcome to apply. I won't tell anybody not to apply, but I will tell you it can often be a very stressful situation because they want so much information, and then it can be a letdown when you get denied. So just be aware it is available. I often tell people not to bother once I figure out what their income is and stuff, but it's out there. I have on here a financial plan. Not everybody needs to hire a financial planner or work with a financial advisor. But what you do absolutely need to do, no matter where you are, is figure out how much additional expenses are going to come along with your child. For me and my wife, it was speech and occupational therapy. Insurance was only going to pay for, I don't remember the exact numbers, but we'll say one visit per week. And the doctors were telling us we needed to get our son, 2 or 3 times a week extra speech and occupational physical therapy because of his deficits. So, my wife and I paid out of pocket for extra therapy. And then you also have co-pays and things like that, that we didn't have before my son's diagnosis and things like that. And I didn't make any more income. So we had to figure out how are we going to add these extra expenses, which were really important to us because we really wanted to help our son out. What were we going to change in our financial situation? I'm active duty Navy. I have no control over making more money because I have promotion windows. Some of you may be in similar jobs where maybe you work for the state or federal government or something similar where you're not going to get a promotion, or it's going to, the way promotions work, it's not something you can rely on anytime soon, or a pay raise. So you have to look at your money going out and money coming in and see what changes you have to make. I have very, very seldomly found that when a family gets a diagnosis, that they can continue business as usual with their finances. Almost always there's something that has to give because of therapies or copays. So it's just something you want to be aware of. It can be as simple as doing something in Excel or a Google Sheet. Doesn't have to be go spend $4,000 or $5,000 with a financial planner. It doesn't have to be that complicated. And it shouldn't be. I mean, unless you have a complicated situation, it's truly something you can do at home, figuring out what your expenses are and doing a spending plan. Where's the money going? An estate plan is critical. And this is if you have minor children without disabilities. Anytime you have a child, you want to make sure that you have a legal guardian identified for that child. And when I say child, I mean under the age of 18. They're not legal adults. You want to have a guardian identified for that child in case something happens to you. You also should be looking at, you know, do you need insurance? Do you want to put a special needs trust in place for the child to provide for the child in the event that you're gone, for whoever's taking care of the child after you're gone, right? So the estate plan would be, and I'm not an attorney, this is where you would go to Elville and Associates. They could talk to you much more detail. But for me, what I should have put in place when my son was born, what we didn't, was we should have had a special needs trust. We should have had a will. We should have durable power of attorneys for both of us. So if something happened to us, the other could act on our behalf. And that came into play when my wife got sick, because I was making decisions as her healthcare proxy, but we didn't have any of the documentation. And it would have been easier on her family if we had had documentation. So you really want to get all of that documentation in place. We should have had life insurance, because when my wife died, I had a house in Connecticut that I was paying a mortgage on, and I was renting in Silver Spring, Maryland. Neither one of those places are very inexpensive. So I was, I'm supporting two households. My wife died. I got out of and then I retired from the Navy. So my paycheck went away, and I'm still supporting a mortgage and rent. If I'd had life insurance, I could have potentially paid the house off. I certainly could have helped pay for caregivers for my son that I was looking, because when I was finding jobs, I needed to make sure I had somebody to help with my son when I wasn't around because I was at work, and life insurance would have helped with that. So that is a middle ground between completing a financial plan and completing an estate plan, because the life insurance is what's going to allow you to fund, to pay for your estate plan. If you have a special needs trust, or if you want to make sure that your spouse is provided for when you're gone, that's where the life insurance is going to come into play. And there are independent insurance brokers out there where you can go and you can hire them just to get the life insurance. You don't have to hire them to do a financial plan or anything else. You can just tell them, this is what I'm looking for. I need help getting life insurance. Can you help me? And they will help you get the life insurance and put it in place. The last thing in Maryland is low intensity support services, LIS. And this is a lottery system. So you apply typically twice a year, and if you get selected for LIS funding, you get a grant for $2,000 that you can use for your child who has disabilities. This money can be used for a wide variety of things. I've used it to pay for the ARC of Montgomery County's After All program when my son was younger. It was a summer program that we paid for him to go to when he was 13. I've used it to pay for his music therapy. Just last year, I used it for music therapy. I know other people have used it to purchase computers or tablets. So there's just a wide variety. And when you apply, you can go to the website and you can download a handbook that really goes into more detail of all the things that LIS funding can be used for. It is a grant. It does not need to be paid back, and I think that's really important to know, that it's money that you don't have to pay back. It's when you get it, you get it. By the same token, if you're not going to use it, let the organization know that you're not going to use it, so the money can go to another family. My son stopped. We didn't use all of the funding for the music therapy, so we gave them the money back so it could go to another family who needed it, because we weren't going to use it. So this is an example of the checklist I would give families that I'm working with. You can download this for free. I've put it out on a couple different websites where you can find this for free and get the checklist. I modeled it out. I took this and modeled it from a checklist that Pathfinders for Autism has. If you go to their website, Pathfinders for Autism has just a lot of tools, and this is just one of those tools. All I did was I made it easier for me to use. It's all the same information. So if you're looking for this checklist, I would encourage you to go to Pathfinders for Autism website. I know it says Pathfinders for Autism, but this checklist is really good for really any disability. So I'm going to pause here before I dive into school years, because I feel like I put out a ton of information, and I want to see if there's any questions, comments, concerns, and also get a feel for, am I talking too fast? Am I talking okay? Not having an audience to look at to see, how it's being received is a little tough. So any feedback like that would also be helpful.
Thanks, Eric. We do have a few questions, and anybody that wants to provide feedback Eric is looking for is welcome. Eric, I think you're doing a great job, in my personal opinion. So the first question we have is from an attendee asking, what is DDA?
I probably should have led with that. That's a great question. DDA is the Department of Developmental Disabilities Administration. It is a state department. So it is in Maryland. The state of Maryland has set aside an entire department to help families and individuals who have been diagnosed with a developmental disability. And a developmental disability are diagnoses like Fragile X, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, autism. I'm sure I'm missing some chromosomal deletions. Anything that is causing developmental delays before the age of 22. And so, yeah, they're state level agency, and then I really should have done a better job explaining this. They don't actually work with families. What DDA does is they take the money from the federal government, from Medicaid, and the state government from Medicaid. And so Medicaid comes into DDA, and then they take that Medicaid funds and they distribute it to families by going through CCS agencies, Coordinator of Community Care Services, or Coordinator of, I might be getting the acronym wrong, but it's a service coordinator, basically. Service coordination is one of the companies in Maryland. You have Optimal, you have Mars. There's several different agencies, and they're the next step. So it comes into DDA. DDA takes that Medicaid money and then says, okay, CCSs, we want you to be the go-between between families and us. And then the money will flow from DDA through the CCS into a service agency like the ARC, Jubilee, Chimes, any of these different organizations that work directly with families. And I hope I didn't make it more confusing. It's easier when I have a graphic, and that's something I'll make a note the next time I have a graphic for that. But I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Next question is, it's been 4 years since we got the DDA approved and told it wasn't needed, too young. We have never heard from them since. How do we figure out who to contact, or when is the age to pursue that?
So this is something I went through. I applied for DDA, was found to be future need for my son when he was 12, 13. I never heard back from a CCS until I moved to Frederick in a few years ago. So it was about 4 or 5 years before I heard from DDA. I would encourage you to reach out to DDA and ask them what the status of your child is. If you still have the letter that tells you which agency is your CCS, you can reach out directly to the CCS agency and ask them what's going on. It's not uncommon for this to happen when you get found to be future need. And the thing you want to look on the letter is, are you supports only or are you future need? Because future need is what's going to turn into services when your child leaves school. Supports only, it gets a little trickier with the funding. But to answer your question a little more directly, I would, number one, if you still have the letter, see which agency is your CCS and reach out to them directly and ask what's going on. And if you don't have the letter, I would reach out to DDA by going to DDA's website and calling them and saying, hey, I don't know who my CCS is. I haven't heard anything since we submitted our application 4 years ago. And you're going to want to look for the region that you live in. And when you go to DDA's website, you'll see the different counties are broken into different regions.
Thank you. Before our next question, I received a few inquiries about receiving the slides. What I do for all the people registered for each of our webinars, the morning before, I send out a welcome email with some information as well as the presentation and resources from our presenter. So you should have them in your email. However, for those that have requested the slides again, after our first question pause here, I will go ahead and resend those slides to those that have requested them. So thank you. The next question, Eric, is from Joe Sperling, who I think you know. And that question is, do you also recommend disability income insurance?
So short answer, yes, but I typically, I don't do too much with recommending any type of insurance specifically, but I want families to think about the risks that they're going to face. So young families, when their child is diagnosed, the two biggest risks they have are loss of income because of an injury or illness, which would be disability insurance, and loss of life, which would be life insurance. So yes, I mean, those are definitely things families need to be thinking about. And shame on me for not addressing it. Thank you, Joe.
So the next question that we have here, also some comments saying, very good pace, you're doing great.
Thank you.
The question is, does this include ADHD? So there's no other reference point to it aside from
so
the question.
ADHD is typically, and this is where I'm not a clinician, so bear with me, but it's my understanding ADHD is a learning disability, and it's more for classification on an IEP or a 504 to receive supports in school. I don't know of anybody who has just in air quotes, just a diagnosis of ADHD who is receiving supports from DDA. There would have to be some other, and somebody if somebody else knows something different, please chime in. But I've never seen a situation where attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, where that has been found to be a developmental disability. I've always seen it categorized more in the learning disability realm.
Thank you. Next question, is the diagnosis required before age 22, or is age 22 the cutoff for receiving DDA services?
So to be deemed as a developmental disability, the individual has to be disabled before the age of 22. If you receive an autism diagnosis when you're 30, you didn't just develop autism. You had autism as a child. So you may be able to go and show DDA that you meet the definition of a developmental disability. It could be harder because if you didn't get a diagnosis until age 30, how much supports did you really need? But typically what they're looking for is, and the DDA website has the exact language. I don't know the exact language, but you have to be disabled before the age of 22.
Okay. What types of services above what DDA would provide if your child is granted an autism waiver?
So the autism waiver pays for just about anything and everything that you would be thinking about getting for your child. To qualify for the autism waiver, you need to make sure your child would qualify for Medicaid. So your child can't have more than $2,000 in their name, and they can't have any income. But that waiver will pay for speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, ABA. It'll pay for specialists, I believe. There's just a ton of, if your child needs it because of their autism diagnosis, it's my understanding the autism waiver will pay for it.
Okay. Hi there. We have 2 kids, one typical and one with disabilities. We started an UTMA account for our typical child, and we are trying to figure out if we should go with an UTMA for our youngest daughter with disabilities, or if we should go with a special needs trust. Can you explain the difference between an UTMA and special needs trust?
Sure. So I'm going to say, first off, you don't want to do an UTMA for your child with a disability, with special needs. A UTMA is a Universal Transfer for Minors Act. And in plain simple English, that means when your child turns either 18 or 21, depending on the state that you set the UTMA up in, that money becomes the child's assets. You can't tell them how to spend that money after they turn 18 or 21. And the reason that matters when you have a child with special needs is if a child has assets in their name more than $2,000, then when you go to apply for SSI and or Medicaid, they'll be denied. If you're thinking of putting money into an account for your child with special needs and it's going to be less than $15,000 a year, I would look at opening an ABLE account instead of a special needs trust. So a special needs trust, and this is where Elville and Associates can do a deeper dive into it. A special needs trust is a bucket that protects the assets from the individual, meaning the individual has no control over the assets, and because the individual has no control over it, it doesn't affect their federal or state benefits. You can put anything you want into that account, but as a trust, it needs a trustee. It needs somebody to control that money, to control the house, to control whatever you put into the trust. And it can be expensive, because you have to file reports for the trust every year. The trust becomes its own entity. That's not a reason not to do it. I mean, I have a trust that I'm not funding right now because I'm not dead. It'll be funded when I'm dead. But it's just another layer of complexity. Whereas an ABLE account it's like a bank account that you can also do investments in, and it's very simple to set up, very, very simple to maintain. A special needs trust will have requirements that go along with anything, with taxes and everything else, because it has a taxpayer ID number. It protects the individual because everything in there is ignored by federal and state agencies, but it can be a lot of extra work while you're alive. And I'm not explaining it very well. I really think an attorney could do a better job. I apologize.
Not a problem. If anybody has questions about special needs trusts, again, we're very happy to answer any questions here at the firm. Doesn't cost anything to get some free advice if you want to have a discussion with one of our attorneys. That is what we're here for. And circling back just for a moment, nice lady asking to reword her question: what services does the autism waiver provide should it be granted?
Well, that's what I was saying. If you get the autism waiver, it pays for anything and everything under the autism waiver, under the autism diagnosis. DDA services are much more structured, where they offer residential, personal supports, adult day program, and vocational based on the level of need of your child, 21, 22, and older. With the autism waiver, so DDA services will not pay for speech therapy, occupational therapy, or anything like that. The autism waiver could pay for speech therapy, occupational therapy. It could pay for anything that your child needs because of the diagnosis of autism. And DDA is much more pickier about what they're going to pay for.
Okay. I think we're finishing up here as far as our questions this round. COVID vaccine related, In terms of eligibility for priority, can autism be considered a qualifying disability? What documentation would be accepted?
This is outside my wheelhouse. It's my understanding, based on what I've read on the state of Maryland website, that developmental disabilities are a category 1B. So as long as you have a diagnosis of category, of autism, which is a developmental disability, then you could fall into category 1B. That being said, my son hasn't gotten his vaccination yet, so I don't know. I'm waiting for the doctors to tell us when they go in and get vaccinated. It's just not in my wheelhouse.
Okay, and last thing, we do have a question about the slide in front of us. I think we'll hold that until you touch on that. We have somebody whose connection might not be very good, and she's asked if you could please just briefly touch on the mention that you talked about related to ABLE accounts and what they do as far as benefits.
Sure. I don't want to do too deep a dive into ABLE accounts. That's not what this presentation is for, but really, really briefly, surface level. An ABLE account is an account where you can put up to $15,000 a year into it, and it does not affect federal or state benefits like Social Security, Medicaid, or housing vouchers. And it's designed to allow an individual with a disability to start accumulating assets, and as long as they are used for qualifying disability expenses, there's no penalties associated. So it's you can use it for food, which you can use it for. There's just a wide range of things. It's really meant to allow individuals who have disabilities to lead more fulfilling lives by not having to be permanently destitute, permanently broke, because they have to keep their bank accounts less than $2,000. And it gives a place for families, grandparents, etc., to put money into it. But the cap is $15,000 a year, and there's a lot of information for ABLE accounts on Maryland ABLE's website or the National ABLE Resource Center or the ABLE National Resource Center. There's a lot of resources there that you can go and learn more about ABLE accounts.
And last thing, and then we'll have you move on here, Eric. We've had Maryland ABLE present with us here in our webinar series 3 or 4 times. Kelly Nelson, their outreach coordinator, is wonderful. I will go ahead in my follow-up message after this presentation, send you all a copy of the video link for our most recent presentation with Maryland ABLE. It's very comprehensive. It'll give you a lot of good information. So that should be helpful to you. So that's all the questions for now, Eric. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So we're going to dive into elementary, middle, and high school here. This is not everything. I'm sure there's stuff I'm leaving out. It's just, this is where I want you to start thinking. When they start going into elementary school, the question is, do they need an IEP 504 plan? I'm not an education advocate or an education consultant. I can barely tell you the difference between an IEP and 504, other than I know that a 504 can be used in college and an IEP is really more for therapies and such. And I could even be saying that wrong. Education's not my wheelhouse. I defer to experts in that. My son has an IEP. I've used education advocates, but it's you really want to make sure you understand if your child does have an IEP or a 504 plan, you want to make sure you understand what they mean and what's in them. And that might be worth you hiring an advocate to sit down with you for an hour and explain it to you. I know I had to, because I'm getting this 20, 30-page document, and it was like reading Greek. So I needed somebody to sit down with me and explain what it was for. And contrary to how it may seem, it was helpful at the time. So I encourage you, if you have an IEP or a 504, or you think your child's going to need one, I believe it would be worth talking to an advocate, or who could do it that wouldn't charge you. Would be Parents Place of Maryland. They're a phenomenal resource for families who have questions about education or medical whose children are under the age of 21. So Parents Place of Maryland is a fantastic resource to reach out to. This is where the therapies are going to come in. Some of these are going to be paid for insurance. Some of them are not going to be paid for by insurance. You really need to decide what you think is important. I'm not going to tell somebody not to get a therapy. We paid for extra therapy out of our pocket because it was important to us. If you are paying for therapies out of pocket, make sure you keep receipts, because the medical expenses that you have, including the mileage to and from those therapies, may be tax deductible if you itemize. This is not a tax presentation. I'm not an accountant. I just want to put this in the back of your head. Save all of your receipts for medical therapies, equine therapy, anything like that you're doing that is not paid for by insurance or by somebody else, and take those to your accountant and see if maybe you can itemize the medical expenses. The low intensity support funding, this is going to be something you can apply for up until you get a waiver from DDA. If you are on the autism waiver or you have another waiver from DDA, you cannot double dip. You can't get LIST funding as well. Start thinking about what kinds of sports and hobbies your children like to do. There's organizations out there, nonprofits out there, like the Up County Community Resources in Montgomery County. I'm not as well versed as in Howard County. I know PG County has a Prince George's Community Resources. I'm sure there's stuff on the shore, Eastern Shore. You really look for things that your child enjoys doing. Don't rule out the fact that just because they have a disability, they can't do something. Get involved. Let them try. If you don't have something in your area and you have the bandwidth, maybe start something with parents that have whose kids have similar interests. Nothing's saying you have to create a nonprofit. It doesn't have to be that formal. It can really just be a couple parents, their kids share common interests, and maybe you get together once a week or something. A big battle for me was, is my son going to have a certificate or diploma? I wanted him to get a diploma. I thought getting a diploma was really important. I didn't understand that if you get a certificate of completion from Maryland, it carries the same weight as a diploma. He's eligible for all the same things he would be eligible for with a diploma. What a certificate does is it lets you stay in school till 21, 22. You don't have to leave at 18. And it also, if your child struggles with the academics and isn't keeping up to grade level, this is where your IEP team may start having a conversation with you. Hey, your child might be better suited for a certificate program rather than diploma. I'm trying to remember when I started this with having this conversation for my son, and I think we first started talking about it maybe when he was 11 or 12. I don't remember. I mean, he's going to be 22 this year, so a lot's happened since then. You're going to want to get an updated psych eval. A lot of times the schools will do these. I don't know how the frequency that the schools require it. I do know that it is something the schools will do. You may want to do it yourself if you have disagreements with the school's findings. It's my understanding that the schools don't have to accept it, but again, I'm not an education expert. They can be pricey because there's a lot of testing that goes into it. And this could also be a good measuring stick for how far has your child come, when you got that original diagnosis to now. When my son started working with DOORS, which is the Department of Rehabilitative Services, he did that when he started when he was still in high school. When we were living in Silver Spring, he went and DOORS gave him a psychological evaluation. to they had a psychologist that was paid for by Doors come in and evaluate them and then give us a report. And that report was to help us understand his needs to find employment. And I'm saying this because it's important to understand the framework that the different agencies are using when they look at the so you could get a psych eval, and the schools are going to look at it for one reason, which is going to be education focused and helping your child meet the educational goals that you and they have set forth. And that same psych eval, when it's looked at by Doors, is being looked at for something completely different, which is what is this person's abilities and strengths to help him or her find a job. Same evaluation, different things that they're looking for within it. And that's part of why you may want to consider getting another one. And again, that is something that I got through the Department of Rehabilitative Services Doors. Schools are probably working with you about transition planning. It should be starting at age 14. That transition planning is starting to have more discussions about what does your child want to do for work when they get out. You can apply for pre-employment transition services through Doors at age 16. You don't have to wait until they're 18. I think you might even be able to do it at 14, but I don't remember, so don't quote me on that. But pre-employment transition services is another bucket of money from Voc Rehab. So there should, sometimes there's a waiting list for Voc Rehab because there's not enough money. But for pre-employment transition services, there's almost always money available to help your child start exploring job opportunities. My son worked over the summer 2 years ago, not because of COVID, he didn't do anything last year, but he worked over the summer and was making a salary. And we put that money into his able account, but it was money he was earning. It was pretty awesome. And that was because of the pre-employment transition services. I encourage everybody to get their child a state ID, even if the child's not going to drive. Having an ID card, it just makes life so much easier, especially as the child starts transitioning into the older teens, 15, 16, 17. You want them to be able to identify themselves. You're going to need it if you're flying, any kind of travel, you're going to need it. It's something that everybody should have, is some form of ID. My son doesn't drive, doesn't want to drive, so we got him his state ID. Another thing Doors in Maryland will do, and I'm not sure if this is every county, but I've heard, it's my understanding, you can work with Doors to help your child get their driver's license. This may be county specific, so you may want to look in your county to see what they have. But I have talked to people that have worked with Doors to help their child get the extra help they needed to pass the driving test. Introducing the law enforcement, making sure that your local police department, county sheriff, whatever, knows your child. Do they walk a certain way down the street, or are they, are they very physical with waving their arms? When they're younger, that may be cute, but when you get a teenager who's 5'10", 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, it could be more threatening. And if law enforcement knows, hey, this is who this is just their normal behaviors, there's less chance for something bad happening down the road. I have a lot of, I really, really think highly of law enforcement. I think in general they do a great job, and I think they have a really stressful environment. So the more that we can do to normalize our kids' behavior instead of keeping them locked up in the house, so if something did happen, they eloped, they got out, instead of it becoming a bigger issue than it has to be, letting people know that this is my child, these are the behaviors, these are the things that they may or may not do, it can really help to de-escalate, defuse a future situation. college planning, thinking about, does your child want to go to college? It doesn't have to be in the cards for everybody. There are organizations out there. College Living Experience is one such organization where they have tools and staff available around the country to help students be successful in college. If you have a student who wants to go to college in Maryland and they are receiving Social Security, SSI, or SSDI, there's a chance for them to get free college where they don't pay for their college courses. They would still have to pay for books and labs, but they wouldn't have to pay tuition. So that might be something that's worth looking into at a community college in Maryland. So that's everything to think. I mean, not everything. I'm sure I'm leaving stuff out. I don't mean to, but these are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about. And everything that you thought about in elementary and middle school, you're going to continue in high school. But I want you to start in elementary, middle, so you don't have to. I don't want anybody feeling like they're way behind the ball and just adding more stress by, oh, now I'm in high school. Holy crap, we've got to do all this stuff. So if you know it's coming, try to get ahead of it and talk to families that may have already been there. And again, I refer people to the Pathfinders for Autism website. They've got a phenomenal checklist there. Like I said, this is what I modeled this off of. I borrowed, stole, whatever you want to call it, and I give the same checklist away for free. So you can get it from me, you can get it from Pathfinders. It's free, and I really, I refer you to Pathfinders because they have a lot of other free resources. So I'm going to take another pause to see how we're doing. It looks like we got half an hour left, and I think, do a quick round of questions and then blow through this, or I can blow through this and just answer all the questions, whatever the audience wants, Jeff.
Sure, let's try to get a few questions in here, Eric, and then we'll jump into this slide if that's okay. Circling back, I did miss one question, which I apologize for, to the person that asked the question. Can you comment if UTMA accounts can be transferred into an ABLE account?
An UTMA account, and I'm speaking from personal experience, you would have to cash the UTMA account out. So you would have to liquidate all the money from the UTMA account. If it's invested, you would have to sell the stocks or mutual funds. You would have to sell them out, and then you would have to take the money that you got when you liquidated the investments, and then as long as it's less than $15,000, you could put it into an ABLE account. I had to do that for my son because we had an UTMA for my son. But you cannot just do a rollover from the UTMA to the ABLE account. You have to cash your investments out and then take that money and put it into an ABLE account.
Okay. Under the slide labeled considerations, who performs the psychological evaluations and how often should it be performed?
So the who performs it, there's a couple different places it can be done. The schools will often do it. I don't know the frequency. I think it's every 5 or 6 years. But don't quote me on that. Again, medical is not my expertise. My son has had a couple different psych evals, and I think so. That's why I think it was like every 5, 6 years, just based on how many my son has had done. The school will do one. Doors can do one. If you want one done privately, you can go to hospitals like Kennedy Krieger or Hopkins, or you can go to private practices in Maryland like Resnick and Associates, with Dr. Rebecca Resnick.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, actually it's more of a comment, maybe you want to comment on it. The complexity, depth, and breadth of this information makes it absolutely clear that attempting to do this without a guide like Eric would likely cause massive frustration, stress, and risk of failure. Don't know if you have any comments on that or would like
I'm
to
flattered.
let that pass.
Thank you. It's it can be intimidating especially if you're seeing this for the first time. I have a lot of free content that I create, because I recognize it can be overwhelming. I have a podcast, ABCs of Disability Planning, and I have a YouTube channel where I do deeper dives into this. But no, I appreciate the comment.
Thank you. Also, comments from somebody else saying doors can also provide other sorts of assessments that are quite useful.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
And then we also have a comment asking if you could explain more about special needs trust in more detail. I would just say, just to save you the statement, Eric, that would probably be time better spent if you wanted to speak more about a special needs trust. That's not necessarily up Eric's wheelhouse, though I know he's pretty well versed in it. But here at Elville and Associates, we do that every day. Either us or another law firm, if you're so inclined, could speak to you about a special needs trust. Again, we can speak to you about it at no cost. If you wanted to do a video or in-person consultation, we are very passionate about special needs planning, as you can hopefully tell by the many workshops and webinars that we offer on it. We have many attorneys here that work with families with loved ones with disabilities and special needs, and we're very happy to speak with you about special needs trusts and other aspects of special needs planning. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I feel much more comfortable having an attorney talk specifics about trusts.
Yes, I understood, and I agree. And I agree. So let's see here. Just additional comments here. Please rehash the free tuition to community college with assessment topic. Can you restate that briefly?
Sure. In Maryland, if you're attending a community college and you are on Social Security, SSI or SSDI, you may be eligible for free tuition at a Maryland community college. So that would be Frederick Community College, Montgomery College, any community college in Maryland. There's on the Maryland state website, there's information about that. I know I picked this in from I learned about this from one of the DDA information sessions. So if you are not yet attending DDA's webinars, I encourage you to attend theirs, because that's where I get a lot of my information as well. But yes, if you are receiving SSI or SSDI, you may qualify for free tuition at a community college in Maryland, only in Maryland.
Okay, last question, and then we'll move on. Many people saying thank you so much for what you're sharing here today. People also asking about your YouTube channel. So maybe that's something you can share with me and I can share with others, or I would encourage everybody, if you're interested in subscribing to Eric's information and posts afterwards, please go ahead and reach out to him so you can subscribe to his information that he provides. It's very, very helpful. I subscribe to a number of the posts that he shares through his different resources. So the last question is, I've heard that there is some organization that helps special needs children learn to ride a bicycle. Do you know the name of it?
I don't know the name off the top of my head. I know the organization you're talking about because they have workshops around the country. I do have that resource in my resource list. So I'm making a note to follow up with Jeff to send Jeff a link to the resource. And then he can share it with whoever asks the question. And in terms of my YouTube channel or any of the other content I create, if you go to my website, specialneedsnavigator.us, you'll find all of my access to all of my resources there: YouTube channel, blog, podcast, newsletter. All of it is a one-stop shop.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Sure. So we're going to dive into the last bit here, 18 and over. If your child is not in school, then you might consider private paying for services that would otherwise be paid for DDA, or if your child didn't qualify for DDA services. Again, DDA provides things like residential services. That means a place to live or supports within a home or apartment to ensure the individual can live safely. Personal supports, helping with day-to-day activities, washing dishes, doing laundry, things like that. Meaningful day services, if they're unable to work or they're unable to work full time, what else they need to be doing something meaningful with their time during the workday. So meaningful day services are getting them out in the community and keeping them from being cooped up in the house 24/7 in a non-COVID environment. And then you have vocational services. And this could be organizations helping individuals find jobs. It could be helping them with a job coach. There's just a lot of different hats an organization can wear, or to help you if you are using somebody like the ARC or Chimes or any of those other agencies. I say DD, I say ARC and Chimes because the ones I most frequently use. There are a lot of phenomenal organizations throughout the state. Please don't take me not saying them to mean that they don't do great work. I would be here all day just listing off all the organizations. So if you don't have DDA yet and you want those services, you could potentially have to private pay for that. This is when at 18 you would want to file for SSI. Even if you were getting it as a child, you have to show that they still qualify once they become an adult. So at 18, apply for SSI. You can apply for it on the first day of the month that they turn 18. And because they are adults now, your assets and your income are no longer considered, even if they're going to school. So you can have a child who's in school till 21, getting Social Security at 18. Something I see often overlooked, if you have a son who was born male, you need to register him with selective service, even if they are disabled. If you do not register with selective service, which is the draft, you could risk losing federal benefits. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to run the risk of not getting federal benefits, federal employment, or state employment just because you didn't register. Registration does not mean they're going to be drafted. If you have a child with a significant disability, then they'll be deferred because of their disability, but you still want to register. You want to continue, if you haven't yet, you want to work with DOORS. You can bring, and I encourage you to invite DOORS to IEP meetings. You can do that, whenever you open a case. Start thinking about guardianship or supported decision making. I encourage you, if you're going to do guardianship, which means you are, you believe your child is legally incompetent of making decisions to help themselves, then I would encourage everybody to at least have an hour consult with an attorney to understand what you're taking on. My preference is to use an attorney when you apply for guardianship. I understand you don't have to. You can go to the court and you can get the documents. I would still want you to talk to an attorney to understand what guardianship is. And make sure you truly understand it. If you're sitting down with an attorney and you're coming out of the meeting feeling more confused than you went in, that's not a good meeting. You really need to make sure you understand what guardianship is. Maryland does not right now have a formal supported decision-making process, but you can still work with your child to support them making their own decisions. I believe there are bills being brought up to bring supported decision-making to Maryland. Disability Rights Maryland has a lot of information about that, I believe, and I would look there first. You can have your child register to vote if it's something they want to do, if they're interested in it. Housing is tricky, and this is a problem in all 50 states. There just is not enough affordable housing. When I'm saying housing, I'm saying, where does your child want to live? Do they want to live in a house by themselves? Do they want to live it with? Do they want to have roommates? Do you want to go to an agency? Do you want them to live in your home? Can you afford to get an apartment for themselves? Are you going to apply for a housing voucher for them? On and on and on. What I've done is I bought a house in Frederick. My son does not want to have any roommates, including me. He has made it very clear he doesn't want me living with him after he gets out of school. So our plan is when he finds employment and he gets to a place where hopefully he can afford to pay for the mortgage, then I will move out. Or when I get to a place where I feel that I can support myself and him and without undue stress, I'll move out and let him have the house and get supports from DDA to help him live independently. So when I say live independently, I don't mean he's living by himself, just like anybody on this call may have lived when they went off to college or got their first job or whatever. He will always need supports to help him out, but he's not um, he's not having me do everything for him. Even if he needs supports, there's something about having somebody who's not your father or your mother helping you that gives you a little more sense of independence, and I'm really big on that. Freezing credit. If you haven't done that for yourselves, I encourage you to do that. It's the best way to avoid identity theft. Along those lines is creating a My Social Security account. You create those accounts so nobody else can create it in your name or your child's name. Freezing credit takes, I don't know, it might take half an hour, 45 minutes all in. I did a YouTube video specifically about how to do that, the websites to do that. It's free to freeze. It's free to thaw out. It doesn't cost anything but time, and it can save you a lot of trouble down the road. Again, think about college. Think about trades. You might have a child who maybe they're not really cut out for college, but they could be a phenomenal plumber or electrician because they get electricity and plumbing has rules. It always works the same way, and they if you get them doing stuff where they're doing the same thing over and over again, they can be very successful at it. That's where a trade might be better than something that requires a little more uh, critical thinking or what have you. And then we start talking about agency or self-directed. I'm not going to do a deep dive into that. It's agency is working with Chimes or the ARC. Self-directed is you get a budget from DDA and you are hiring your staff. This can be a full-time job, at least in the beginning, because you are responsible for making sure that your staff has paid time off, has sick leave. You are their boss. When you use an agency, the agency is doing all of that for you. You want to know what the child wants for personal life. Think about what kind of legacy you want to leave for not just for your disabled child, but for your other children as well. I see that a lot where sometimes you can have a child with very significant needs and parents might feel guilty because they haven't done enough for their children without the disabilities, and it happens. So maybe you want to leave a legacy there. The estate plan, I didn't show it on every slide, but I really encourage you to revisit your estate plan every 5 or 6 years, if for no other reason than because laws change. But life happens. I don't know that I've ever gone 3 or 4 years where something didn't happen where I was like, I really need to rethink what's going on. If you have an adult child over the age of 26, you need to start thinking about health insurance. If they're approved for SSI, they're going to automatically get Medicaid in the state of Maryland. If you get SSI before the age of 22, they could qualify for the disabled adult child benefit, which will get them Medicare when you file for your Social Security. That's another whole rabbit hole that I'm not going to have time to go down. I did create videos on YouTube about the disabled adult child benefit, and I talk about it more on YouTube. But the takeaway for that is, if you have a child who is going to qualify, then file for SSI at 18. Don't wait if you think they're going to qualify for SSI. And again, I refer you to Pathfinders for Autism, because I think they have a phenomenal website with resources. And this is a link to my website and my email. And looks like we have about 15 minutes for questions, Jeff.
Well, great, Eric. Thank you so much. And let's jump into some questions here before I have some final comments. And we have just an FYI by somebody that seems like he's in the know. The comment is self-directed services is an additional support service for people and can be funded by DDA. I don't know if you have any comments about that.
No, right. It's you either do self-directed or you use an agent. I think it's either or, but you may be able to do both. But yes, the money to hire staff comes from DDA. You're the person that has to make the hiring firing decisions. DDA is paying their salary.
Okay. Next question. If I get guardianship, is it easy to bring it back?
That would be a question for the attorney, but I think so. That would be a good question for Elville and Associates. So when you sit down with the attorney to ask, this is one of those questions I would ask the attorney, because that's a really legal question.
Okay. And actually, it looks like that is the end. That is the end of our questions here. So
Awesome.
let's see here. I have a gentleman asking about your site. So here is Eric's site, specialneedsnavigator.us, a wealth of resources and information. Eric at specialneedsnavigator.us. And just wanted to thank Eric for truly an outstanding job and being a wonderful resource for everybody here on our webinar today. Let me go ahead and switch that over. 1 second here. And Eric, you mentioned that there were a couple other things that you do on a weekly, monthly basis. Can you tell everybody in attendance the other resources that you provide people along with presenting with people like us?
Sure, Jeff. I have a weekly podcast on my ABCs of Disability Planning. The episodes are released every Monday morning, and those episodes are meant to introduce the listeners to a organization or an individual that they may not be familiar with, who may help within the disability space. Not all of my guests are disability related, because our lives are not just the disability, but it's really focused on introducing listeners to ideas and organizations that are across the country. Most of them have a national reach that they can apply to their lives. And then I have a YouTube channel where I put up videos every Wednesday. Currently, those videos are interviews. I've also been uploading brain dumps of 10 minutes or less of things like SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare, just all those kinds of topics. I try to keep the brain dumps to 10 minutes or less, and then the interviews are longer format. And I have a weekly or a monthly Ask an Expert on the second Wednesday of every month. Tonight will be an Ask an Expert with Joe Sperling, and that's Zoom meeting 7 p.m. Eastern on the second Wednesday of every month. And I think that's everything that I'm putting out there. I do create a ton of content. I do a blog every week, which is again just a tool I use to help parents and individuals that are trying to rethink or try to get some new perspective, and that comes out every Monday morning as well.
Well, that is great to know, and it sounds like a lot of information, and I'm sure a lot of people appreciate it. And we try to share a lot of Eric's information on our Facebook page as well, and share it with as many people as possible, because you're certainly a wealth of information and knowledge, and we appreciate it and appreciate you being here today. And so with that being said, I have a little bit of follow-up to do for our attendees today. And while wrapping up here, if you do have a final question, now would certainly be your time to get that question in, as we do have a couple of minutes left, and it looks like we do have one last question. So the question is, Eric, you're not off the hook yet. I'm just kidding. So the question is, if I have a guardianship, what happens after I die?
An attorney can probably answer this question better than I can. My understanding is, because I'm my son's legal guardian, my understanding is when I die, the successor guardian that I have named will step in and take over. If you don't name a successor guardian, it's my understanding that the state is going to try to find a successor guardian. But again, an attorney can give you a much better answer, but this is my understanding of it.
Yeah. Okay. So with all that said, we continue our webinar series here and are grateful for all the attendees that have been a part of our webinar series over this past year, and we keep getting more and more people on our series every week, which we're very grateful for and appreciate your interest. We have 3 new presentations coming up in the next several weeks. On the 24th, we are going to be talking about guardianship and the alternatives, what parents and family members need to know. So that is something that we do specialize in here at Elville and Associates, is helping people understand guardianship and helping them navigate those waters if you need to pursue that. So that's something we can talk to you about here. We're going to have a presentation by Megan McCullough, who is one of our principal attorneys here. She is a great resource and something that you might want to jump on. Also on, that's Wednesday the 24th. On Thursday the 25th, we're going to do a new presentation as well, a little bit different, 10 early signs of Parkinson's. That's going to be by Dawn Lewis, who is an outreach coordinator for the Parkinson's Foundation. So very pleased to start a new relationship with that really great organization. On Friday, the 5th of March, we're going to talk about navigating the Social Security disability process. So that also is something that might be of interest to everybody here on this discussion. So that's also going to be offered by Ms. Megan McCullough, who is the attorney here at our office that works with our clients in the SSI and SSDI arena, as well as in some guardianship matters as well. So a few that might be of interest to you, and we hope to see you on there. I do have some follow-up for you. I always send out a follow-up email after each presentation. I will send out a copy of the slides again for anybody that wants or may not have received it for some reason. I'll send out a link to the ABLE video that has been a big hit over the past year. We've had ABLE here a few times, and they've always done a wonderful job. They're a great resource. I encourage you to take a look at that. I'll also send now I'm thinking about it, I'll go ahead and send the presentation of the ABLE webinar. They don't mind me sharing that resource. I'll go ahead and send that along with the video so you can follow along. So I'll send that along with that. And I'll go ahead and send a video of this presentation as well. That takes a little while to upload and get processed. So once that's available, I'll send that in the follow-up message as well. So. And
I sent you, Jeff, I sent you the bike riding thing. I just found it. It's iCanShine.org, I think is the website.
Great.
But iCanShine is the organization that teaches children how to ride bicycles.
Very good. So I'll include that link for
the others.
I'll include that link for everybody, and especially you, Peter, who asked that question. So, and let me just double check if we have any last questions. So asking, please let us know how to access these presentations you just mentioned. Okay, well, that's a great question. So yes, thank you. You can, many of you are on our mailing list to receive invitations to these presentations already. If you're not for some reason, you can visit elvilleassociates.com and visit our events page that has information on all of our upcoming webinars, and we're adding new ones, it seems like almost every couple of days. And the information describing the webinar in depth is there, along with a link to register for each webinar. And then you'll get your personal link to register for the webinar sent to you right after you click on the link, and you'll be all set. So, and if you have any further questions, you can always email me at jeff@elvilleassociates.com. You can always call me. I'll provide my information as well in my follow-up email, 443-676-9691. That's my cell phone number. So don't call me after 9 because I'll be in bed. So thanks for your interest in our webinar series. We appreciate you being here. Eric, thanks again. Great job as always. Thanks for all you do for the communities that you serve. And we look forward to seeing everybody again on another webinar soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Take care.